DM says a male human character with 18 strength is still physically stronger than a human female with 20 strength. This has been going on for a while, and my girlfriend has been feeling down due to how it's unfair and completely broke the fantasy immersion she expected. We're gonna leave the group anyways, but the other players are very chill and we want to keep playing with them, and they feel the same way. It's really just the DM, to be honest. I know his world, his rules, but still. Thoughts? Man, if only we had a way of gauging how strong someone is relative to someone else in this game. Like a number that reflects one's ability, if you will. Some kinda score? I'm guessing a higher number would be better than a lower one too, right? Ability score? Nah, they'll never catch on. But you know what I hope catches on? Today's sponsor, Apotheosis. Space. The final frontier. These are the voyages of Apotheosis, Sci-Fi Edition. No, go away, Spelljammer. Shoot! Ever wanted to play a tabletop RPG where your actions decided how you leveled up, unrestricted by class? Ever wanted to play that same RPG, but twist it from its fantasy setting and take it to the stars? That's right. The tabletop RPG where you level your character by taking action boldly goes where no furry shark-human hybrid has gone before. With brand new species, and some familiar fantasy faces making a comeback. Apotheosis Sci-Fi Edition is a fully standalone core rulebook that is designed to be fully compatible with the original Apotheosis rulebook, allowing for games that mix sci-fi and fantasy elements. Take to the stars, with rules for flying and modifying starships. Use brand new vehicles, and hop in a mech suit to live out your Mobile Suit Gundam fantasies. Learn new spells and abilities. And please play Evonu. I mean, look at this little guy. He's a little tiny and cute, and oh god, he has a death ray, run! But don't just take my word for it. Follow the link in the description and try it out yourself, for as little as $15 for the digital copy, or $35 for the paperback copy. And for those looking for a hybrid sci-fi fantasy setting, why not get both the original Apotheosis book and the sci-fi edition bundled together for a special discount, which also includes Apotheosis' first core content expansion. Thank you to Apotheosis for sponsoring today's video. And with that out of the way, let's get into our next story. Content warning for sexual content. This is gonna be a weird one, so hang tight. I'm into wet look. It's a mild fetish, which basically makes me turned on when I'm swimming or bathing with my clothes on. It's harmless, and I mostly keep it to myself. But for the past few months, I've also been writing ridiculous, over-the-top erotic stories about it online. Initially, I did it just for fun, but eventually people started offering money for customs, so I turned it into a side hustle. And it's been pretty lucrative so far. Recently, my D&D group started a new campaign. DM told us to send him our backstories for review, and I accidentally sent him one of the erotic stories I had written. I deleted the message, praying he didn't have the time to download it. Then I sent him the correct file, and he just responded with the thumbs up. I thought I was out of the woods. Then came the first session. I was the only girl in the group, the rest were guys, with the exception of the host's wife, who didn't play but stayed to watch. I was playing a human sorcerer, and I had her wear some fancy robes she had stolen from a noblewoman at some point. It was a desert campaign, and the first encounter involved an oasis. I ask if there is a way to get to the center of the oasis without swimming, and the DM says there were some rocks sticking out of the water, which I could traverse. I ask how many rocks there are, and the DM says 10. I decide to jump from rock to rock in an attempt to get to the source. DM has me make a dexterity check for every damned rock. I succeed the first 3, then fail the 4th. As I fall into the oasis water, the DM describes how my robes become wet, change color, and become heavy, and then asks me if I want to stay in the water or try to get out. It felt kind of off, but I brush it off and just say I swim over to the source. We discover the source of power is some sort of portal, and at some point we go through and find ourselves in some sort of underground temple. Fast forward a few minutes, and there is a pool of water between us and another door, with a narrow rope bridge leading across. We decide to traverse the bridge one by one, with me last. And guess what? The bridge breaks and I end up in the pool. As I clamber out to the other side and walk towards the rest of the party, the DM proceeds to vividly describe how my dripping, wet clothes wrap around me, squeaking as I walk, and so on. At this point, I'm uncomfortable, and I ask him to stop because it's kind of weird. The other guys agree. He frowns, but admits he's gone too far. The next week, we have another session. We're still in the temple, and we're facing some water elementals. Because, of course we are. Their attacks target me more often than I'd like, and the DM again makes remarks on how wet I am. At this point, I'm about to speak up, when the host's wife tells the DM to stop, because I'm visibly uncomfortable. Dude throws a fit, picks up his stuff, and leaves. I'm still not sure why he did it. It's statistically unlikely that we share the same kink. So I just think this was some poor attempt to seduce me. Whatever the case, we never played with him again. Kink and dungeons. Dungeons and dragons. These things can sometimes overlap, and terrifyingly enough, so do the dragons, but I digress. So long as everyone consents to it, I personally think that it's perfectly fine if a game of Dungeons and Dragons involves kink in some capacity. What's definitely not fine, however, is when someone finds out about your kink and decides to shoehorn it into every scenario possible, with the intent of, or at least what appears to be their intent, seducing the OP of this story by demonstrating in-game that he's totally into it too, in the hopes of perhaps getting himself a little wet. Now enough with the water sports. Let's dry off and talk about everyone's favorite kind of problem player. The main character. Main characters happen when someone spent way too much time making up bad original characters for all of their favorite TV shows and anime on Tumblr and Wattpad. Characters who are hot, strong, lack any flaws whatsoever, always make the right decisions, and of course, always win. To anyone catching on, this kind of mentality when making a character for D&D is basically the internet roleplay equivalent of when you were 7, playing pretend in the sandbox at recess, and you hit a kid with your magic sword, and they said, "Nuh-uh, it doesn't work. I have invincible armor." So with that in mind, let's gather up a murder and dive into this story. The cast. DM, Misty. Problem player, Lusamine. Other players, Guzma and Cynthia, and myself, Ingo. Friend who was DMing another campaign Lusamine was in, Gloria. Sorry if any of this is super incoherent or grammatically incorrect. I'm on a lot of allergy meds right now. I'm both woozy and bored out of my skull. So, around this time last year, or maybe 2 years ago, somewhere around there, I was a player in a campaign using a homebrew setting and system. The plot was an SCP-esque survival horror, with a twist. Our party consisted of the captured beings, trying to escape the facility. It was a mix between traditional online roleplay and earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons. The traditional roleplay was to make up for the lack of a physical board, as this was done through Discord, text-based, for archival purposes, in case the DM wanted to do a callback to anything. We were all friends who had done this before, so we assumed this would be absolutely no problem. However, a friend who hadn't joined any of Misty's campaigns before wanted to join. Enter Lusamine. Lusamine really liked elves. A lot of people definitely have a default race to play as, yeah. When in fantasy campaigns, I usually play an Aasimar. They're fun to draw, but there was something off about how much Lusamine liked elves. It felt almost obsessive, like elves began to become the only conversation topic. We all assumed she was just excited at the time, despite the setting allowing for essentially any homebrew race that's balanced, and the fact that no one else was using traditional D&D races. I was an android rogue borrowing from tiefling stats, Guzma was a skeleton, Cynthia was a humanoid owl creature, etc. She made an elf. We figured it would be fine. There technically was nothing wrong with it. We assumed she was new to homebrew and was using her default race or recycled character to ease herself in. Her elf rogue also had a pet/companion. An undead dog thing? That'll be important later. Session 0 wraps up. Everything seems okay. We all get familiar with each other's characters. Cynthia, however, was not present, as she did not join the campaign until far later. Session 1 begins. Lucamine continues to talk in the out-of-character chat about how much she loves her character. A little weird, but I love talking about a lot of my characters too. Still odd that this wasn't covered in Session 0, but My character makes their entrance. They remain hidden out of sight, still suspicious of the group. Technically, nobody is supposed to know that they're there without some kind of perception check. Lucamine's elf immediately says something along the lines of, "Hello, Milon. I can hear you breathing." She goes to the out-of-character channel to tell me Milon means friend in Elvish. My character steps out of their hiding place, making some snarky, light-hearted comment about how they don't need to breathe. The elf then says something like, "I am an elf. My enlarged ears could detect your presence." I brushed this off. As Mary Suish as it felt, it wasn't that important. I kept my guard up, though. Campaign otherwise goes smoothly for a while. Aside from the elf always pointing out that she's an elf. "Well, as an elf, It's different when you're an elf. You feel persecuted. As an elf, I know how that feels." Yada yada. Every single scene. The elf's dog began to turn into some kind of passive murder hobo who tried to immediately attack every villain Misty introduced. It backfired, obviously, but then Lucamine would get genuinely upset that the DM wouldn't let her zombie dog kill every single NPC that wasn't a good guy. She would passive-aggressively post things like, "LOL, villain is lucky they survived that," or "My dog was probably going easy on them, haha," etc. At this point, Misty, Guzma, and I already had a private chat open, where we're contemplating what on earth we just walked into. Not to mock, but just out of genuine concern for the future of the campaign. In our server, we also just had some general chatting areas, just to hang out, talk about characters, the campaign, or even just what you had for lunch. Chill stuff. Lucamine starts implying she's attracted to elves. Like, really attracted to elves. "LOL, isn't Legolas pretty here? I have an elf problem. XD, I just designed a pretty elf lass for another campaign. I'd smooch her. LOL." Misty, Guzma, and I are now in full what the flock mode. We knew she'd make our lives hell if we kicked her out, too, as we knew she didn't handle disagreement well. And at the time, none of us really saw her as a mean person. We know better now, of course. Just kinda bad at roleplay. But as a self-proclaimed empath, Lucamine took everything incredibly personally. If you disagreed with her on something, or say, kicked her from a campaign, she'd vanish for days, no matter how mundane. As an empath myself, this party's just way too out of line. We empaths, we feel pain from others. When my grandma gets run over by a bus, I can't help but feel a little bit sad. Normal people wouldn't get it, but me and other empaths, we understand. When we get confronted about cheating on our girlfriends the day before the wedding, we get that sneaking suspicion that she's really upset, and we can feel that. I can feel that you want to get back to the story, so we're gonna do that. Finally, we were honestly curious to see where this was going. Again, not to laugh or poke fun or anything, just to see if, hopefully, she'd improve. We wanted to get through this. We also had kind of an unspoken agreement to redo the campaign without her in the future. Not maliciously, just so the world stayed between our circle like it always had before. Misty contacts me. We discuss a plot twist, where my player character disappears mysteriously, before the reveal that they're being kept hostage by the villain as bait. A little cliche, but still fun, and adds some tension. Plus, I was going to be having a busy week, so that meant I didn't have the energy to participate anyways. I could just watch as a spectator. And yeah, Lucamine completely ignores the plot point being set up. Instead, she begins trying to make the story about her characters. Dropping the reveal that her dog was a shape-shifting ancient necromancer god who wild-shaped into a dog? And every time someone in out of character was like, "Hey, what about Ingo's character who vanished?" she just ignored it. Around this time, someone who's been a longtime friend of both Lucamine and I joins the campaign. Enter Cynthia, who's admittedly a far more skilled writer/roleplayer than me. Despite being friends with Cynthia, I definitely admit I was a little intimidated by her skill. Her character's vibes were what Lucamine probably wanted to do. She played an anthropomorphic owl creature who was a demonologist, and her travel companion, a mimic who sounds like the Flying Dutchman. She had both characters crash a scene, with Misty's permission, while the Indiana Jones theme blasted from a boombox. It was hilarious and glorious. Once she made her character and joined, she usually managed to roll the plot back on track pretty seamlessly, much to Misty's and everyone else's relief. And she managed to reveal more about her character in a way that complemented the plot. A wild contrast to Lucamine's DeviantArt crapfest. This makes more sense in context, I think. It was pretty self-inserty, but in a deeply uncomfortable way. However, the spotlight ended up off of Lucamine and her #HotElfChick too long. Lucamine starts scripting encounters in the roleplay segments without warning, and only doing so when Misty was specifically introducing a major plot point. Even though scripting encounters that aren't player character introductions is, the DM's job. At this point, Cynthia had hit my direct messages. I don't recall exactly what the message was about, but it went something like, "Hey, Ingo, I know Lucamine is our friend, but do you feel weird about this too?" So, of course, she immediately gets added to the group chat with Misty, Guzma, and I. We decided it was best to just push the plot forward whether Lucamine liked it or not. All goes smoothly within the campaign for a while. But outside, outside, Lucamine talks about how she wants to get cosmetic surgery to have elf ears. She rewrites historical events, usually regarding colonization or the US Civil Rights Movement, with elves instead of real marginalized people. She makes a homebrew spell to turn a human into an elf that includes turning them whiter. Stop! Okay, I can't. I have to say something. Lucamine, no more empath shit. Let's talk for a second. You and me. Let's go. I get that you're on your white girl OC shit, but you probably didn't mean this to be as flocked up as it is. But those histories you're taking from, there are real people in there, who in some cases are right now in the world who are marginalized and fighting for their rights. Is it okay to make your fantasy race kind of like that? Yeah, sure, but don't go around pretending that understanding how elves work is directly equivalent to understanding real-life cultures. You don't have to fetishize them and make them hot people with pointy ears so you can tell people you know what racism feels like. I'm also getting some Ubermensch vibes you probably didn't intend, but it's there and I'm just gonna say it. I hate this story. I hate this story. I hate it so much. Let's just get back. Let's get back to the story. Let's finish this. I genuinely wish I was making this up. But no. Elf Fetish Chick is real. And out there somewhere. The campaign is beginning to draw to a close after several months. My character had to be haphazardly reintroduced, unfortunately, as Lucamine's behavior wouldn't allow for an uninterrupted big reveal. I figured that was fine. I'd just fix it when we redid the campaign. Halfway through the second-to-last encounter with the BBEG, she reveals the shapeshifter was a Balrog, and has it try to wreck the building and kill said BBEG. Guzma found this hilarious, and wasn't afraid to have her character express this. Thankfully, Lucamine didn't notice. Yeah. The private group chat is in maximum overdrive right now. We're trying to figure out how to get the plot back where it was supposed to go. Keep in mind, none of us were exactly seasoned players at the time. However, super shortly after that session wrapped up, Lucamine starts vaguely venting about how bad people are bad people, or something. Turns out, she got kicked out of a sci-fi homebrew campaign hosted by my friend Gloria. Gloria is a super talented DM, but their work covers a lot of dark topics that are not for the weak of heart. Misty's campaign was more horror game-esque dark, while Gloria's campaigns often handled dark, real-world topics like cults, queerphobia, religious trauma, violence stemming from bigotry, drugs, etc. He handles these topics amazingly well, and with a lot of respect and care, but he also gives players joining these campaigns warning that he's going to cover these topics, so they have a chance to back out if it's triggering. Lucamine accepted and joined a campaign, agreeing to the terms and conditions, and still got pissed off at him for covering these topics anyways. I was actually a spectator in this campaign. If you were wondering, yes, her characters were pseudo-elves. I would say her participation in this campaign deserves a horror story of its own. Please let me know. I'm a glutton for punishment, but it's similar to what happened here. Trying to be the main character, attacking NPCs, etc. She demanded Gloria should change his lore, because it made her personally uncomfortable. And that if he didn't, he was an awful human being who didn't care about others. Keep in mind she saw the content warnings and still agreed to joining. Oh boy, that's why she was using our campaign server as a therapy group all of a sudden. We, of course, take Gloria's side for obvious reasons. We all know Gloria, and that he wouldn't hurt a fly aside from self-defense. We don't call Lucamine names or anything, we just try to defuse the situation. Lucamine gets pissed, and storms out of our server too. Not before making some horrible accusations towards Gloria that I refuse to describe here for how vile they were. Feel free to guess. She then goes into my direct messages again, and just starts treating me like her therapist. Why just me? No idea. I'm guessing she went through everyone else first, because she said something like, "I lost all my friends because I called someone out for being mean. I'm sorry for bothering you, Ingo, but I don't know who to talk to. I feel awful." Now, I later discovered that this is what she did to her other friends whenever she was even mildly inconvenienced. Someone disliked a movie she liked, practiced a religion she didn't like, etc. I'm guessing it was to act soft again, and get people warmed back up to her. But I'm not sure. Of course, given the awful things she said about Gloria and how guilt-trippy Lucamine tended to be, I just blocked her. We were able to wrap up the campaign, before beginning to plan how we'd redo it. A few months later, someone found another one of Lucamine's social medias, and she had made an account for her original story she planned to publish online. That was just entirely plagiarized from Gloria's campaign, down to every detail. She stole his NPCs, his world building, his lore, his plot points, all of it. Except she removed everything she didn't personally like, and made herself insert the savior of everything and everyone who smited all evildoers. Ooh, she hated redemption arcs for some reason. Like, she legitimately thought you were a morally bad person if you wrote one. Someone from Gloria's campaign anonymously called her out on it. I read it, and again, no insults, no name-calling, just a polite request to stop stealing someone's hard work. She proceeded to type up a full 2 paragraphs or so about how this was a coping mechanism for me, and that we made her want to toast her bath, and gave her gender dysphoria, got her institutionalized, etc. Before finishing off with the wannabe Charles Dickens phrase, "You have earned the title of being my abusers. Let this word of damnation cut through your soul and pierce your heart like a knife." Paraphrased. It was even more dramatic than that, I believe. And from there, a few people who knew her opened up about how she tried to bully them, or push them, into adding elves and dragons into their stories, regardless of genre. Sci-fi, fantasy, grimdark, etc. One person even had her try to push her into adding elves to a Star Wars fanfic, of all things. But other than that, we've all been free of the scourge of Lusamine, the elf fetish lady. And I hope you all will be as well. And finally, as mentioned before, keep in mind none of us other than Lusamine were seasoned roleplayers. Aside from her, we were all still in high school. So, yeah, that's why the whole situation is far more awkward than it could have been. We basically had never done this before, and yes, we definitely could have handled it better. But it's a horror story regardless, and felt fitting for this sub. No need to treat this like am I the asshole. I know nobody here is perfect. Farewell, travelers, until we cross paths again. Least insane Twilight fanfiction writer. Just based in this story alone, it sounds like Lusamine's main character syndrome extends beyond just D&D. I hope that she learns that fetishization isn't tolerance or support. But honestly, I won't hold my breath. As for the party, you were in high school, so I'll forgive you for how you handled this. But I hope that in the future, you and your group talk to the problem player and nip your issues in the bud then and there, before it gets as bad as it did. It's awkward. It's difficult, but it's also necessary. And I hope my viewers can take home the same lesson. But regardless, thank you for making it to the end of today's video. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you don't miss next week's video. And if you made it this far, why not leave a comment? And if you can't think of a comment, leave the comment ELF, so I know you made it to the end of the video. But if you would like to further support the Crow's Perch, you can do so on Patreon, link in the description down below. And you too can join patrons like our Counts of Quills. Patrons like Shar K, Kurito Kazuto, Critical Kunik, Evix, King Drazil, Christian Pip, Cosmosis, Rikus, Vincent, Haley Thompson, Zero Fang, and Netscape Navigator. Or you can join one of the many barons of Beaks, like Jayvon Meighan, Jesse Schoedel, KuntosWeasel, MoetisMaou, Chunky Salsa, TechBlog, Kurestor, Cardespawn, AModestPastry, Jester King, Gintahl, Lord Rende, Gibber-Woods, Wormy, Den of the Drake, McYeatley, and Onya.
Or you can join with the Dukes of Feathers, like TheSchoolBus, MirageVaxus, Shirotatsuma, Quinn, TheForgottenDruid, Jarett Suhr, Blues Otters, Jarett Zemlin, General Constantine Chase, Doc Salty 96, MulQueeny, and Acroth.
And with all of that out of the way, I'll see you next time, as the crow flies.